Good morning. My name is Joe Bandel, and I am the last Rosicrucian. Today we're going to talk about the Cathars. This melting pot of cultures in southern France after the failure of the Crusades created a new form of Manichaeism. Now, the teachings of the church were that only good existed, that only good was real, and that evil was the absence of good, that only light existed and darkness was the absence of light. We can hear these things today. But the new Manichaeans taught that evil existed and was just as real as good was, that darkness was not just the absence of light, but an important part of life itself. In fact, life began in the darkness of the human womb. They taught that man had both a physical body and a soul, and that the physical body and the soul was in eternal conflict. You can see this re-emergence of the question of duality and dualism. This conflict of ancient duality went back to the Godhead itself. The desires of the flesh were not sins because they were the gifts of the God of the physical. Give to the Spirit those things that belong to the Spirit, and give to the flesh those things that belong to the flesh. That is one of the concepts that these new Manichaeans, the Cathars, came out with. Because there was a strict division between things of the physical and things of the spiritual. And you could not judge one by considerations of the other. So there was no punishment for sin, and eternal damnation was just nonsense. The sacraments of penance and communion were invalid and just as ridiculous as if a dog were to bite a stone, as Nietzsche said. People belonged to the dark side with their bodies and the light side with their souls. It was that simple. And to try to mix them was a conflict. But the Bogomils that settled in southern France brought with them these old organic Gnostic beliefs carried over from the goddess religions and Zoroastrianism. And that created its own division within this new group of people. And it's centered around the idea of duality. The organic Gnostics, the Bogomils, they saw duality as sexual, the physical embrace of male and female, and saw it as one of the most sacred things there was in the development of the human soul. They believed true opposites in eternal embrace, in a loving embrace. And this became the religion of the uneducated common folk. And the early stirrings of what was to become known as witchcraft. They established secret covens and celebrated their dark carnal sexual mysteries in the forests, caves, and on the mountaintops. You got to remember, uh, rational atheists and social enforcers lived in their heads. And the social enforcer especially had discovered the soul, had discovered that awareness lived as a independently of the physical body, and that their whole focus was to the non-physical. So the more educated intellectual social enforcers became saints. They lived according to an unbelievably strict code of behavior and a mortifying asceticism. They denied their bodies. They mortified the flesh. They were zealots and believers, and they spread their spiritual beliefs with passion and conviction. They were considered saints and healers who could purify a person at the time of death simply by the laying on of hands. So even within the Cathars, you see a big split. On the one hand, you have people retreating from the physical world because of the emergence and the realness of a spiritual experience that went beyond what physical life had to offer. It's too easy to think, hey, one is right and one is wrong. The real thing is to validate what these people had. The soul exists, it's real. But the soul, as conceived and experienced by the social enforcers, was created out of mental and spiritual energies. It did not contain the emotions, the deeper emotions. It was head trippy, but it was real. It existed. It had the ability to exist independent of the physical body. Okay, but they maintained that duality, that distinction where black and white cannot mingle, where the human body, the thing that is physical, cannot, it has its own life, the spirit has its own life. They do not mingle. The others, the organic Gnostics, they believed in the integration and the loving embrace of both dualities, of male and female. And they celebrated that as basically that through physical love relationships, the soul was not only created but strengthened, and its powers were strengthened. And they were actually magicians. They were working forms of magic, whereas the others, the social enforcers, the truly spiritual ones, were working a different form of magic that did not impact physical reality to any great degree. But the one thing both groups could believe in, that they could agree upon, was a fanatical hatred for the Catholic Church and its dogmas. They were anti-Catholic, anti-church. And this united them, and it caused problems that the church had to deal with. And it did deal with them through the attempted genocide of this entire population. I will talk about that later in my next video. Right now, what I want to say is, in summary, the Cathars were split into two groups. One group believed in duality as a loving embrace of opposites, or the organic Gnostic position, and the other group believed in a strong, unbelievably strict asceticism and renunciation of all things of the flesh. And they agreed. And you could look at this as the beginning of the teachings of the left-hand path and the right-hand path, where both recognized the spirituality of the end result, but taking different directions for that. And both being strongly opposed to the Christian church as it existed at that time. Thank you for listening. I'm running out of time. Please share this post or this video if you find it interesting. Subscribe so you don't miss any. Check my webpage for more posts that are just as interesting in their own way. And please consider a donation. A small donation of $5 is great because every little bit helps. And think of it as a cup of coffee and a donut for some of the things I'm sharing. You can donate at the link on my main webpage. That webpage link is down below this video. Thank you. Have a good day.